Madongkin is a handsome producer with a big goal to change the future. He wants to create a new history in the field of biotechnology with the help of a professor. In his daily work, he has won many awards because his reality show always captures the public's interest.
Okay.
This success is also thanks to the perseverance of a talent show participant named Cameron. Yes, an independent girl who funds her college education by working many part-time jobs. Despite having a sweet appearance, Miran is a brave girl who is not afraid of anything. In a modest home, Miran lives with her parents and a younger brother who has a mental disability. One day, Donkin tries hard to persuade director Kim Hong-soo to support him in conducting a major experiment. The director refused because he considered the idea to be unreasonable, even though he had always witnessed Donson's madness in his show. In the end, the director agreed after hearing Donson's goal to do it in order to make new history in the world. In carrying out the experiment, Dong-an, along with an assistant and a professor, directly approached Miran to be their volunteer. To convince Miran, Professor Huang showed a video proof of when he conducted the same trial on luba-luba animals. Instead of agreeing, Miran became more determined to refuse the offer, knowing she would be frozen like a fish. However, Donson's assistant, named Youngki, kept urging her to participate. He promised many benefits and mentioned that the experiment could also impact disease treatment techniques.
물론 지금은 고칠 수 없지만 미래 언젠가는
Miran agreed to join because she hoped that through the experiment, she could cure Konam-take, her younger sibling who has a mental illness. On the other hand, Han-dong-kan's participation in the experiment was opposed by his girlfriend, named Na-hyung. She was worried that something bad might happen during the process and feared that Donkin would never return. Donkin promised that he would be fine and would return soon in good health. The plan was for the experiment to last only 24 hours, after which Professor Huang would wake up, the volunteers. Before leaving, Donkin managed to place a ring on Hyun's ring finger as a token of his love. Donkin had always supported Hyun's career as a reader of commands. As a historical record, Donkin assigned Yoon-jilu to document every minute from start to finish. During the experiment, Professor Huang asked everyone involved to keep the location of the experiment a secret from others, even from their own families. This was intended for the safety and success of the trial. Unknown to anyone, Professor Huang actually had an enemy from his past who had also killed his own mentor. No one knows what happened afterward, but someone was seen lurking around his laboratory. In short, the experiment began and everyone watched with enthusiasm. 2 hours before the rethawing process, Professor Huang received a mysterious phone call and hurriedly left.
박사님, 어디 가시게요?
The professor promised to return before the time was up because he was the only one who could create the formula to awaken both of them.
지금 이 시간 이후부터는 촬영할 수 없으니 여기서 얼른.
At that time, Yoon-gil wanted to capture the moment when the volunteer woke up, but the professor drove him out of the lab room without explaining any reason. Minute by minute passed and the 24-hour period was almost over. However, Professor Huang had not yet returned. It turned out that during the journey, the professor was followed by someone, which caused him to have an accident. The trial period had ended, unexpectedly triggering the alarm in the lab room, and Kaiban attempted to control the situation, which caused the room to shake violently. Yoon-gil felt panicked and immediately left to save himself. Time passed, and the events of the trial remained a secret. Since Dong-chan and Miran had not returned, both of their families reported them as missing persons, and all the police officers were busy searching for them. Meanwhile, under the orders of director Kim Hong-soo, Yoon-gil kept his mouth shut tightly about the experiment incident. Director Hong-soo reasoned that if the trial were exposed, Not only would the company suffer losses, but those two people would also be affected. For life. They could end up in a mental hospital or at the police station for interrogation until they die. Afraid of imagining such things happening to him, Yoon-gil complied with the request. In addition to Yoon-gil, director Hong-soo also asked Hae-young to keep the experiment a secret. In return, he would make Hae-young the main news anchor, like
교체될 거야.
everyone criticized Hae-young and called him heartless. Because he still appeared very calm when his lover disappeared. Hae-young even read the news about Dong-chan's disappearance without showing any expression. Everyone was busy searching for the missing Dong-chan and Miran. Police officers went to the location where Dong-chan's phone signal was last detected. However, upon arrival, the officers found nothing but an empty building. Unbeknownst to anyone, in fact, Dong-chan and Miran were actually in the very basement of that building with Kaibum, who was always faithfully and carefully monitoring. Dong-chan's family and Miran's family also distributed flyers informing about their disappearance. Miran's younger brother, Man-tae, waited for her every night in front of the house, blowing the whistle that Miran had given him. Because he often got bullied, Miran had indeed told her brother to blow the whistle whenever someone bothered him so that she could quickly come and help him. It wasn't just Man-tae who felt distressed. Hae-young was also actually devastated by Dong-chan's disappearance. However, for the sake of professionalism, she tried to appear calm and hide her sadness. To her, Dong-chan was not just a boyfriend, but also a tutor who guided her from Inal to Saibat now. While Mama's family mourned the loss of their beloved son, Miran's family chose to go to the temple to pray for their daughter. After a period of waiting, a little while later, their prayers were miraculously answered through an anonymous letter providing information that Miran was doing well. Even though it was just through a photo, Miran's family felt very relieved when they saw it.
고미란 씨는 살아 있습니다.
Time passed, and it has been 20 years since Miran and Dong-chan disappeared. Kaibum, who was attending a scientists' conference, received a notification on his tablet computer about the latest developments in the laboratory. He saw that Professor Huang's bed was empty, and he hurried there to confirm it. It turned out that since the accident happened, Professor Huang, who was thought to be dead, had been in a coma and was being cared for by Kaibum in the underground laboratory. Of course, along with Dong-chan and Miran, who were still in a preserved state. Suddenly, Professor Huang woke up from his coma. With his body still weak, he immediately started preparing a concoction to wake up Miran and Dong-chan. As soon as the solution was ready, he injected it into both of them. Then, Professor Huang lost consciousness again. When Kaibum arrived at the place, he found both capsules empty and Professor Huang lying on the floor.
박사님! 박사님!
With exhaustion and covered in sweat, Milan walked home. However, upon arriving there, he found no one, and his house was empty without any sign of life. When Miran tried to call his family, his phone couldn't be turned on. He then went to the repair center. A technician explained that Miran's phone was outdated and couldn't connect to the current cellular network. At that moment, Miran insisted that he bought his phone 3 months ago, which was the latest model. The repair technician was puzzled by Miran's statement.
신제품인데 이거.
In the end, Miran went to the police station to ask for help. Miran was very worried about his family's condition and thought that they might have been evicted from their home because they couldn't pay the rent. He also believed that his family must be suffering.
할 수 있을까요?
Unbeknownst to Miran, his family was actually living comfortably and even owned their own building. The police officer was very surprised when he saw Miran's identification card. They couldn't believe that Miran was in his 40s with such a youthful face. Meanwhile, Dong was rushed to the hospital after being found unconscious in the middle of the street. The doctors and nurses at the hospital were puzzled by his below normal body temperature. They repeatedly checked it because it was the first time they had encountered a patient like that.
이상하네.
After regaining consciousness, Dong immediately went to find Yoon-gil to verify the recordings during his absence. However, he fainted again after some time. Meanwhile, Yoon-jil had become the team leader and director Hong-soo had taken the position of CEO of the broadcasting company. Yoon-jil was in the middle of scolding someone when he received a call from the hospital informing him about Dong's condition. Yoon-jil was very surprised to hear Dong's name.
야, 이 새끼야!
Together with director Hong-soo, they immediately went to the hospital to confront it. Upon arriving there, director Hong-soo and Yoon-gil were shocked to see Dong's appearance. However, Dong himself couldn't believe seeing his closest people who had now aged, including his family members who had also arrived at the hospital. Chaos ensued as everyone was shocked to see Dong's condition, who had engaged. After receiving information from the police, Miran's family followed him to the campus. They used the campus radio to locate Miran, who was found sitting on a bench in the park. Miran was astonished when he realized that 20 years had passed.
뭐지? 이 자식아.
Byung-sim, also known as Dong Hyuk, Miran's former boyfriend who is now a psychology professor, was also surprised when he heard Miran's name, but he quickly dismissed it as a mere hallucination. Mantai blew his whistle while walking around the campus park. Hearing that sound, Miran immediately went to look for him. When she finally met Mantai, Miran cried seeing that he had grown up. The man could even carry her.
언제 이렇게 큰 거야?
In the end, Miran was able to reunite with her family. When her family took Miran home, she was grateful because all this time, her family had been able to live comfortably thanks to her earnings from participating in the experiment. The condition of Dong Chan's family was quite the opposite of Miran's. After losing Dong Chan, the family went bankrupt. Even his father had passed away.
아버지?
To make a living, the family opened a chicken restaurant and lived in a modest house. During his absence, Dong Chan's sister, Dong Ju, had divorced twice. And Dong Sik also already had a daughter. Unlike Miran's family, who knew the reason for her disappearance, Dong Chan's family was left wondering where Dong Chan had been all this time.
어떻게 얼굴이 저렇게 하나도 안 변하고 나타날 수가 있어?
Dong Ju thought that the person in their home was not the real Dong Chan, but rather a clone of him. Meanwhile, Dong Chan's nephew called him a vampire because he didn't age, just like what he saw on TV dramas. Through his nephew, Dong Chan learned many new terms and knowledge that he had missed over the past 20 years. Meanwhile, Pyong returned home and told his wife that he heard Miran's name mentioned today. It turns out Pyong Simp had changed his name and is now married to one of Miran's friends due to a one-night stand. It is known that his second marriage has always been supported by his in-laws, and it seems that his second marriage is not very happy because they sleep separately. To find out the reason why he slept for 20 years, Dong Chan returns to the laboratory, where he meets Jaibum, who explains everything. Professor Huang suffered from dissociative amnesia, which caused him to suddenly wake up in the middle of mass coma, his subconscious urging him to wake up to thaw Dong Can and Miran. Taibum deliberately announced the news of Professor Huang's death to protect him from someone's malicious intent, and only Professor Huang knows who that mysterious figure is. They also can't report it to the police regarding the accident that happened to him 20 years ago because the statute of limitations has expired.
공소시효가 지나서 경찰한테 수사를 맡길 상황은 아니네요, 이제.
Currently, they can only wait for a miracle that can awaken the professor again. In Kaibum's conversation with his assistant, they are worried about the condition of Dongkan and Miran's bodies after coming out of the freezing capsule, because only Professor Huang knows the formula to return their body temperature to normal. As long as the professor remains unconscious, both of their lives are still in danger.
그 두 냉동 인간을 살릴 수 있는 사람은
While Miran was missing, her mother always applied for annual leave for her daughter, allowing Miran to return to her campus. Miran finally returned, surprising the administrative staff when they saw how long she had been on leave, as it didn't match her youthful appearance. However, Miran was used to such responses and could only smile in response. Byung-sim, who saw Miran walking among the crowd of students, tried to follow her to confirm what he was seeing. He was so shocked that he covered his mouth when he finally came face to face with Miran. However, Miran didn't recognize him and just walked past. Meanwhile, the leader of Hongsu and Hyun-gil were discussing the risks following Dong-chan's awakening. They were afraid that if Dong-chan told everyone about the experiment, it would inevitably link them as the ones responsible. Their worries increased even more after learning that Miran had also returned safely. Dong-chan then came and expressed his desire to return to work and continue the program he was once very proud of. The leader of Hongsu rejected the idea, but Dong-chan threatened to apply to another office. Finally, he agreed to let Dong-chan resume his work. Instead of revealing the secret about the test, they decided not to disclose it. Dong-chan asked Hyun-gil for help to meet with Haeyoung because he missed her very much. The two of them met at a cafe near the office. At first, Dong-chan couldn't recognize his beloved, but Haeyoung immediately recognized Dong-chan's face. She was very shocked to see his appearance, which was exactly the same as 2 decades ago. Meanwhile, she had undergone many changes, especially wrinkles on her face. That was what made her feel insecure when Dong-chan asked her to meet again every weekend. Haeyoung also tended to act cold and indifferent, which made Dong-chan's heart even sadder. At the same time, Miran also went to the office. Seeing her walking towards him, Hyun-gil felt scared. From her face, it was clear that Miran was very upset and wanted to hit him, just like when she hit her former teacher. However, it turned out that Miran did not recognize Hyun-gil. Instead, she slapped Dong-chan's face while yelling at him. This drew everyone's attention. Worried that their conversation would be overheard by others, Dong-chan took her to a room. Miran was angry and regretted agreeing to participate in the trial event, which caused her to lose 2 decades of her life. When she wanted to vent her frustration, Dong-chan said that he experienced the same thing. He is now 52 years old, but 20 years of his life disappeared without any meaning.
내 심정이라고 다르지 않아. 나도 진짜 미치겠다고.
Dong-chan also explained the reasons why they had to go through that situation. It wasn't just Miran who was frustrated with it. He also didn't know how to deal with it anymore.
나도 마찬가지야. 나도 깨어났더니.
Dong-chan started working at the broadcasting office and became a director for variety entertainment shows. His new colleagues thought that Dong-chan was a newcomer who got the job through connections. A colleague named Mr. Young-jun greeted him, and then arrogantly taught Dong-chan how to survive in the current entertainment industry by catering to the desires of investors rather than creating quality shows. Mr. Young-jun behaved rudely to Dong-chan and belittled him. However, Dong-chan remained silent until Young-gi came to address this. Young-gi scolded Mr. Young-jun. Then Dong-chan reprimanded Young-gi for failing to train his subordinates. Mr. Young-jun was astonished to see his respected superior appear submissive and obedient to Dong-chan's words, who was just a new employee.
제가 또 뭘 잘못?
이거 어?
During the planning meeting, with the intention of presenting an innovative idea, Dong-chan ended up looking foolish because his idea had already been implemented while he was frozen. In a separate place, Young-gi mentioned that his senior had suffered brain damage from being frozen, as Dong-chan was no longer as creative as before.
이건 정말 선배를 위해서 하는 말이니까 상처받지 마시고요.
Meanwhile, at her campus, Miran caught the attention of 2 students who were interested in her. Meanwhile, Byung-sim almost fainted when he saw her sitting in the class he was teaching. Although Byung-sim's face seemed familiar to her, Miran didn't realize that the lecturer was her ex-boyfriend because he had changed his name.
황병심이 20년 후에 딱 저 모습이겠네.
Afterwards, Miran, who was still using an old phone, contacted Dong-chan, saying that she wanted to meet with the leader of Hongsu to discuss the memorandum they had previously agreed upon. On the other hand, Professor Huang had fully recovered from his coma and looked much better. Jaebong was very happy to see him because only Professor Law could save Dong-chan and Miran. However, it turned out that he was experiencing memory loss, which made him forget everything, even how to walk.
저 기범이에요. 조기범 박사님 어시스트.
In the end, Jaibom taught Professor Huang from the beginning again, like how to eat, walk, and the names of objects as well as other basic knowledge. Miran was also amazed to see skyscrapers that weren't there before, and even more astonishing when she saw a baby in a stroller. In her meeting with the leader of Hongsu, Miran presented the memorandum letter. She intended to demand compensation for the 20 years of her life that were lost. After calculating carefully, Miran demanded $70 million from them. The leader of Hongsu and Haeungi couldn't meet that demand because they didn't have that much money. Both of them tried to persuade Miran to be more lenient, and eventually, Miran agreed to give them some time. Throughout the meeting, both Miran and Dongkan were feeling hot and repeatedly drank cold water. Seeing his boss troubled by Miran's demands, Haeungi suggested that they just admit their mistake and accept a fitting punishment. But of course, the leader of Hongsu rejected that idea.
또라이도 개친상 싹또라이야. 왜 저런 애를 올렸니 그래?
Now, Miran already has a new computer. When she checked her email, she read a message from Tianjia asking about her well-being in America. While Miran was frozen, her mother informed her friends that Miran had moved to America. Miran then invited her two best friends to meet, and once again, her appearance was a surprise. At that time, Tianjia and Yongsun asked about the treatments Miran had been receiving in America, which of course made Miran look as youthful as ever. Tianjia shared that she had divorced and now felt traumatized by Bria. Meanwhile, Yongsun kept her marriage to Byung-sun a secret, who was none other than Miran's ex-boyfriend.
모르는 게 차라리 나. Oh my gosh야.
At the same time, Dong-chan also had a meeting with Haeyoung. Although he felt happy to be able to spend time together again, Dong-chan felt that Haeyoung was not as warm as before. Dong-chan said that he was the one who went to be frozen, but ironically, it was Haeyoung who turned cold. Dong-chan's colleague was shaking things up, as he suddenly appeared and overpowered team leader Haeunti. Even the boss Hongsu couldn't do anything against him. A colleague linked his presence to a producer who was reported missing 20 years ago, but strangely, all news and recordings about him have been erased. Sometime later, an article emerged mentioning the return of a legendary producer after he was known to have disappeared for 20 years. Boss Hongsu and Haeunti were thrown into a panic because of it.
며칠 실종된 방송국 MPD.
Dong-chan then met with his former brother-in-law named Detective Young, who is currently working in the police force. They discussed a murder case involving Professor Huang. Detective Young suspects that the murderer is targeting Prof. Huang and causing him harm. He also suspects that the perpetrator is a Russian who now serves as a senator, allowing him to cover up the case. However, Dong-chan actually suspects someone else as the perpetrator, even though he doesn't know who that person is.
아닐 수도 있지 않아?
After thinking it over, Miran finally decided to go to the broadcasting office. She asked Haeunti to employ her there. After losing 20 years, she wants to use her time to earn money again. Dong-chan also advised Miran to take care of her health, so she doesn't catch a fever. If at any time Miran feels nauseous or unwell, he asked her to contact him immediately. Dong-chan then approached Haeunti and very angrily asked him why he never searched for him while he was missing. He couldn't understand how Haeunti could be so indifferent towards him, considering their previous friendship. Haeunti couldn't explain anything, leaving Dong-chan feeling very disappointed in him. At one point, Dong-chan met with Haeyoung to ask her the same thing. Based on the investigation notes, Haeyoung gave her testimony to the police, but she didn't mention the experimental project she was involved in at that time. He thought that maybe Haeyoung really didn't want him back. Haeyoung directly refuted that accusation, as she had been waiting for Dong-chan to return all this time, even willing to remain unmarried. Haeyoung admitted that she really couldn't do anything to search for Dong-chan because she was under pressure from her superiors.
없어진 건 사라진 건 당신이잖아.
At that time, the head of the broadcasting office was held by a man named Lisiadu, who ordered directors Hongsu and Haeyoung to keep the results of the cryonic experiment tightly sealed. That man even threatened them. For whatever reason he did it,
especially after learning that Dongkin survived the trial. Lasiudu pursued the whereabouts of Prof. Huang and ordered people to follow him. On the other hand, leader Hongsu was discussing Miran's request to work at the company, and he planned to reject the request. However, Dongkin then explained the consequences they would face if they refused Miran's wishes. Miran might go to another broadcasting office and talk about the cryonics trial she experienced. And of course, that would be very risky for them.
제대로 빠기도 고민하네. 난장 플레이가 펼쳐지겠지.
In the end, leader Hongsu left the decision to Dong Chan. Dong Chan said that he would only accept Miran as an intern. However, before that, Dong Chan wanted to see the work plan proposal she made, because Miran wants to become a blood assistant on a variety show. Miran deliberately took the job to overcome her trauma. Dong Chan could understand Miran's intention, and he then asked her to always keep her body temperature below 31 degrees Celsius. For the sake of her safety, Dong Chan also explained their current situation, where they have to wait for Professor Huang to regain his memory in order to restore their condition to normal.
박사님이 기억을 찾아야 이 문제를 해결할 수 있어요.
Meanwhile, Miran's family visited Dong Chan's family at their restaurant. There, they were busy blaming each other for the situation that befell their children. The two families argued and neither wanted to back down, until finally Dong Chan arrived, bringing Professor Huang with him. Since the families were already aware of the situation, Dong Chan asked them all to find a solution for Professor Huang.
사람 앞에 두고 다들 너무 말을 함부로.
He deliberately brought Professor Huang out of the laboratory, after realizing that he was being followed by strangers. By placing the professor in an open area, it would actually minimize the danger he might face. Meanwhile, Byung Sim was trying to ensure that the Mirang he saw was indeed his former love. Because all this time, he thought that the person was Miran's daughter, who had a face exactly like her mother's. He then asked his assistant for help to check her background. He was very shocked after discovering that the girl was indeed Miran from 20 years ago. Not only did he faint, but Byung Sim also wet his pants from the shock.
이 무슨 황당한 시츄에이션이지?
His assistant called Young Sun to inform him and ask for a change of clothes for Byung Sim. Both still tried to figure out how Miran became his Adam. They were amazed to see Miran's very classic belongings. While people were using tablets, Miran was still faithfully playing cassettes on her Walkman. Miran didn't even understand the term group chat room and thought it was an actual 3D room. When her friends invited her to send messages, Miran had difficulty handling it because the contact list on her old phone was limited. Miran also couldn't have any type of payment card, which made it difficult for her when she wanted to buy food. Fortunately, her two male friends were very kind and always helped her. After the article about Dongkan surfaced, the leader of Hongsu planned to feature Dongkan on the main news show. He asked Dongkan to admit that he intentionally disappeared all this time because he was bored with variety shows and was looking for new ideas. The two of them had a debate about it because Dongkan refused to lie. The leader of Hongsu did not want Dongsan's honesty to cause problems for him. Too late, Lisuto also emphasized to him to keep the matter tightly under wraps. To persuade him, Hongsu gave Dongkan a car and some money, along with other facilities he needed.
우리가 어떤 식으로든 보상할게.
Dongchon also used the car and was amazed by its sophistication. He then went to buy a cell phone for himself and Miran. He also quickly followed Miran to her campus. Meanwhile, Miran was chatting with Youngsun and Tiangjia when Dongchon caught up with her. At that time, Miran briefly discussed Byung Sim, whom she considered a jerk and felt sorry for his current wife. Initially, Youngsun wanted to admit her marriage to Byung Sim, but she refrained from doing so because of what Miran said. Miran then went with Dongchon to discuss the work plan proposal. When the two were in the parking lot, someone pointed a knife at Dongchon and then kidnapped both of them. Dongchon and Miran were locked in a freezing car with the hope of making them talk and reveal Professor Huang's whereabouts. Instead of feeling cold and scared, they actually enjoyed the freezing room.
무진장 띨띨한 것 같아.
The situation reversed when the kidnapper opened the door of the freezing room and the two of them quickly trapped the kidnapper inside. Meanwhile, the kidnapper's accomplice drove the car away because Dong Chan threatened to report them to the police. In the end, Dong Chan and Miran walked through the field in the heat, which eventually caused Miran to faint. Dong Chan panicked and immediately rushed her to the hospital. Dong Chan forbade the doctor from raising Miran's body temperature and instructed them to give an injection to lower her body temperature. Dong Chan himself then immediately doused his body with very cold water. He was very worried about Miran's condition, but he couldn't stay by her side because he had to attend the main news event that night. Before the news event started, someone tried to be attentive to Dong Chan, but Dong Chan always ignored them. During the event, Dong Chan actually admitted the real reason he disappeared all this time, which was none other than the cryonics experiment he conducted. However, Dong Chan did not mention any other parties involved in the experiment. The project was entirely his own desire and responsibility. He is currently trying to perfect his experiment, as it still causes side effects like hypothermia. While Hong Soo Shak was shocked by the statement, everyone else applauded the breakthrough of the century. As a result of Dong Chan's statement, the whole world was abuzz with talk about the first S-human. Scientists were busy studying the freezing formula, and officials wanted to gain attention through Dong Chan's presence.
국회 상정해야 하지 않을까요? 청와대 홈페이지가 마비가 됐답니다.
Jaidong, who also received many questions from reporters, explained that Pra Huang, the inventor of the freezing formula, has now been declared deceased. In addition, the broadcasting office where Dong Chan works also received many calls inquiring about the official. Everyone was busy talking about it, and even the television show aired Dong Chan's face as a Korean captain figure. Dong Chan's family didn't want to be left behind either. They took advantage of the opportunity to promote their restaurant and successfully increased sales turnover. After seeing the impact of Dong Chan's statement, leader Hong Soo regretted his decision. He should have just let Dong Chan mention his name so he could experience the popularity now. Hearing that, Young-ki called his boss a person without self-respect. At that moment, Dong Chan was looking for Young-ki and found him in leader Hong Soo's office. He scolded both of them for chatting instead of working.
야, 손영기, 넌 왜 맨날 사정실에 있어?
Young-ki objected to Dong Chan's attitude of always ordering him around, even though he was the team leader in the office. He felt Dong Chan had undermined his self-respect in front of the subordinates. However, Dong Chan just ignored Tarsabat's protest. Today is Miran's first official day as an intern at the office. She was in charge of getting her identification card. Her heart raced when suddenly Dong Chan touched her forehead to check her temperature. Dong Chan then gave her a temperature-measuring watch along with a fever-reducing injection. He advised Miran to install a tracking device on her phone so he could ensure her safety at all times and quickly come to her aid if anything happened. Dong Chan reasoned that the two of them were destined to be together after everything they had been through.
그야 우린 운명 공동체니까.
A reporter approached Dong Chan to ask about the rumor that after he became a cryonic human, everything he touched would turn into us. The reporter also wanted to confirm about a female volunteer who participated in the experiment with him. Dong Chan immediately denied the news and said that he was the only one who underwent the experiment. At the campus, Miran showed off her new phone to her two friends.
짠!
When Jaehan asked if it was true that Dong Chan was Miran's boyfriend, Miran immediately denied it, which made Jaehan happy. Unbeknownst to Miran, Jaehan is the son of Young-sun and Byung-sim. Afterwards, Byung-sim suddenly appeared and claimed to be Miran's first love.
나야. 네 첫사랑.
He thought that he was the reason Miran participated in the trial, because she was heartbroken before. He then apologized for the past events, and Byung-sim invited Miran to rekindle their relationship, as he was also about to divorce his wife. Hearing all of Byung-sim's words, Miran became angry and beat him up until he was bruised. In the end, she had to visit the police station because of the violence she committed. Dong Chan followed Miran there, initially scolding her for acting like a thug. However, after hearing her explanation, Dong Chan turned around and supported Miran's actions.
잘했다. 응? 야, 진작 얘기를 하지. 잘 때렸어.
Dong Chan warned Byung Sim that he would beat him up if he dared to bother Miran again, as Dong Chan obviously felt responsible for Miran's life. Those words sparked a commotion between Dong Chan and Byung Sim. Miran tried to break them up, while the police officers were just enjoying the show. When they left the police station, Dong Chan held Miran's hand, making her heart flutter again. On the other side, Li Xiaodu, along with his secretary, went to Dong Chan's family restaurant. While they were eating, Professor Huang accidentally bumped into them, but neither of them recognized each other. Professor Huang himself started to recall fragments of his memory after seeing Li Xiaodu, but he couldn't conclude anything yet. When Dong Chan approached him, the professor said that he might have done something bad in the past, which is why many people now want to harm him.
아무래도 뭔가 위험한 일을 했던 것 같아요.
Eventually, Miran found out about the marriage between Byung Sim and Yong Sun, and she regretted her words that had once hurt Byung Sim's wife for having a husband like him. Yong Sun herself was very angry upon discovering her husband's behavior as he was trying to woo Miran back. When her husband came home, Yong Sun immediately threw a shoe at him and kicked him out. Instead of regretting his actions, Byung Sim asked Kyungsia for help. Of course, Kyungsia refused and kicked Byung Sim out of his house, switching to Kyungsia, who called Dong Chan to accompany him for a drink. He was still upset with Dong Chan's attitude, who still considered him a boy like 20 years ago. The two of them then debated about each other's age.
너 내가 이해가 안 되지?
A television show aired a discussion by a group of experts about cryonic humans, which managed to stop their argument. Everyone watched the show seriously, and then a caller joined the program. The caller demanded that the government pay more attention to the first cryonic human and ensure their future.
지원을 해주셔야죠. 솔직히 보험 혜택도 없고.
Hearing the caller's voice, Dong Chan recognized it as Miran's voice. He immediately called her to reprimand her. Dong Chan forbade Miran from revealing her identity as a cryonic human because it would obviously endanger her life.
너 냉동인간인 거 밝혀지면 안 돼. 어?
Hyang wanted to use the ring that Dong Chan had given her again. She then approached Dong Chan and asked him to start everything over from the beginning. She confessed her love for him and wanted to do many things together to regain something that was once lost. However, that confession was met with rejection from Dong Chan. He admitted that he now hated Hyang after realizing the fact that Hyang did nothing to look for him. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Miran. After receiving that rejection, Hyang could only cry in her car. Elsewhere, Yong-sun talked to her son and expressed her intention to divorce. Instead of forbidding or supporting her, Jae-hyun asked his mother if she could live without her husband's presence.
아빠 없이 살 수 있어요?
Even though his parents fought all the time, Sayan could see how much his mother loved his father all this time. Yong-sun then met with Miran, and the meeting became awkward after Miran learned about his marriage to Byung-sim, and he conveyed the plan for the divorce.
시작을 해야 끝을 내지.
Miran couldn't understand how her friend could make a mistake, while drunk that led to his marriage. Yong-sun then admitted that he actually liked Byung-sim long before Miran dated the man, but now he has to end the marriage for the sake of his pride, living with unrequited love. It is seen that Prof. Huang asks for help from Man-tai to tie his hair before he goes to work at Dong Chan's family restaurant. According to the mutual agreement, Prof. Huang will be at Miran's family home at night and at Dong Chan's family home during the day. Miran's mother said she would make a ginseng tonic for her daughter. Upon hearing this, Prof. unconsciously forbids Miran's mother from doing it because it could raise Miran's body temperature.
냉동인간은 체온이 31.5도가 유지돼야 해요.
Everyone, including Prof. Huang himself, was surprised by his words, but afterward, he couldn't remember anything. Dong Chan interrogates Kaibum at the police station after hearing about the explosion of his car. Fortunately, Taigum managed to leave the car a few seconds before it exploded. Dong Chan is thinking about who is behind the incident after targeting Prof. Huang. Now the killer is targeting him and Kaibum. Gunkin may know the cryonics formula. He then asks Kaibong to check who is in the cryogenic chamber, but Kaibong argues that the data is only held by Prof. Hwang.
그건 오직 황 박사님만 알고 계십니다.
He then goes to meet Haeyoung to ask for help. For Kaibong's safety, he asks Haeyoung to report on the car explosion incident involving Kaibong. Haeyoung agrees to the request, stating that she wants to protect Dong-chan as well. But Dong-chan instead asks her to ignore him and protect others involved in the cryonics project, one of whom is Miran. Meanwhile, Liu Xiaoju orders his subordinates to ensure that the real Liu Xiaoju will never wake up from the cryogenic chamber. It is still unknown what the purpose is and who that person really is that they intend to hunt off. Hwang and the people involved in the cryonics project. Meanwhile, Miran is undergoing an ethics committee hearing at her campus for the assault case against Byung-sim. Thinking she would be sanctioned, Byung-sim actually disrupts the hearing by confessing that Miran is his girlfriend and that he indeed deserved the punch.
저는 맞은말 했습니다. 저는 맞아줬습니다.
Miran becomes very upset and angry when she asks Byung-sim to treat Yang-sun well, but Byung-sim instead asks Miran to wait for him. He promises to quickly resolve his matters and return to Miran's embrace. Miran returns to the broadcasting office to attend a planning meeting. But before that, Dong-chan checks her body temperature again and tells her to eat first.
여태 밥도 안 먹고 뭐 했냐?
Dong-chan is very attentive to Miran, which makes her heart race and raises her body temperature. In the meeting, Dong-chan uses Miran's proposal as the initial idea for the upcoming project. The event is themed around going back to the past using a pro-party from the 90s era. Hearing Dong-chan's explanation, the entire team enthusiastically welcomes the project. Before going to the team dinner, Dong-chan runs into Haeyoung in the office hallway. Miran is surprised to see Dong-chan dismiss Haeyoung so easily, even though previously they were quite a loving couple. At the team dinner, Dong-chan shows his concern for Miran and forbids her from drinking. He also takes her home and advises her to always carry a fever-reducing injection wherever she goes. During that time, Dong-chan meets with Man-tai. He then understands Miran's reason for agreeing to participate in the experiment, which is to cure her sibling.
그 실험을 그렇게 쉽게 결제했구나.
The next day, Dong-chan picked up Miran again to go to the location that would be used for filming. They walked into the forest, and after wandering around, Miran realized they were lost. The hot weather made Dong-chan and Miran exhausted, and their body temperature started to rise again. Drenched in sweat, they kept walking, trying to find their way back. Eventually, Miran couldn't take it anymore and fainted. Dong-chan planned to inject the body temperature-lowering serum, but it turned out Miran forgot to bring hers. Dong-chan sacrificed his own serum to inject it into Miran's body, sacrificing himself. Sometime later, Miran regained consciousness and found Dong-chan lying on the ground. Seeing Dong-chan's body temperature and heartbeat rising, Miran panicked. Not knowing what to do, Miran could only cry. Unfortunately, nature helped them both by bringing rain, which brought Dong-chan back to consciousness. Without waiting any longer, Miran immediately kissed Dong-chan. Dong-chan was stunned into silence, but Miran fainted because her heartbeat rose due to the kiss she gave. After finding out that Dong-chan went out alone with Miran, Haeyoung felt annoyed. Meanwhile, Dong-chan and Miran managed to get out of the forest with the help of the residents of 104. Both of them acted awkwardly. Miran was very embarrassed facing Dong-chan and tried to avoid him. When she got home, she called Dong-chan and apologized for the kiss. She thought she was going to die, so she acted spontaneously because she wanted to know what it felt like to kiss a man. But now she regrets the kiss because it turns out she is still healthy and not dead.
죄송하다고?
죽는 줄 알고 그랬어요.
Dong-chan went to the detective at his office because he had found new evidence. Nikolai, the person who had long been suspected as the murderer of Professor Huang's teacher, had actually been dead for a long time. This further convinced them that the attempted murder of the professor and Jaidong was the work of someone else. Unbeknownst to both of them, their conversation was being watched by someone. On the other hand, Hongsu's leader called Dong-chan to invite him to dinner. It turned out that the meeting was at the request of the former company leader who is now running for president. He intended to leverage Dong-chan's fame as a cryonics man to further his political interests. However, Dong-chan responded with a cold demeanor. A little while later, Misak sat down and joined them. Upon seeing him, Dong-chan was astonished because the same person was inside the cryonics lab tube. He confirmed this with Jaebum, and once again, they couldn't reach any conclusion because only Professor Huang had the confidential data of the cryonics project participants. Everyone decided to separate, and Byung-si looked for a new place to live. Accidentally, he found an ad for a loft house for rent, and it turned out that the house belonged to Miran's family. With great enthusiasm, he went there and immediately signed the rental agreement. That morning, Miran met Dong-chan again at the office. She was still awkward even though Dong-chan tried to act normal. Dong-chan then invited Miran to talk. He also apologized for the kiss that happened before. Miran even offered compensation to him as long as Dong-chan would forgive her. Hearing those words, Dong-chan thought that Miran considered the kiss as just a past example to tease him. Miran immediately denied the accusation and apologized again. Dong-chan then asked her if, at that time, Miran had been with another man, would she still have kissed him? Honestly, Miran said that she wouldn't have done that kiss with someone else who was with her. Hearing that answer, Dong-chan felt happy and told Miran not to apologize anymore. A woman called Haeyoung to inform her that she knew about the car explosion involving Jaebum. She was willing to give her testimony by coming to see Haeyoung at the broadcasting office. However, she set a condition that Haeyoung should bring Dong-chan with her. Haeyoung agreed to the condition and immediately contacted Dong-chan to come to her office. To welcome Dong-chan's arrival, she quickly tidied up and dressed herself. Although the two briefly exchanged glances, Haeyoung's hope of regaining Dong-chan's attention seemed futile. Dong-chan then asked her to find information about a man named Lee Seeder. Meanwhile, Kyungja, along with her older sister who used to work as a fortune teller, went to the broadcasting office. While doing a live broadcast for her social media, Miran greeted both of them, and Kyungja's sister saw Dong-chan passing by in front of her. Pointing towards Dong-chan, Kyungja's sister said that he is Miran's destiny, a match made by God 20 years ago. Miwang was surprised to hear that. Meanwhile, Dong-chan met with Kaibum to ask about the body temperature-lowering serum he had. Kaibum prohibited using the serum too frequently because it could endanger his life. In the long term, the serum causes an increase in body temperature, making it very risky for Dong-chan and Miran's bodies. Dong-chan contacted Miran and conveyed the information, making Miran realize Dong-chan's sacrifice when she fainted in the forest. Her heart started pounding again every time she thought about Dong-chan. While Dong-chan went to check the filming location, Miran went for a walk with Jaehyun. Although she enjoyed her time with Jaehyun, Miran always thought about Dong-chan and kept messaging him constantly. Meanwhile, Haeyoung went to follow Dong-chan and deliberately booked the same hotel room. She wanted to use the opportunity to build a relationship and even imagined spending a passionate night together. However, after waiting all night, Dong-chan never showed up, dashing her hopes. Even so, she tried to act normal when she returned to the office the next day. Dong-chan noticed something new about Miran's appearance. After going out with Jaehyun yesterday, Miran became aware of the latest fashion trends and the existence of social media with all its sophistication. She also bought a gift for Dong-chan and placed it on his desk. A message claiming to be from a friend drained her account balance when Miran realized she had been scammed, and she immediately reported it to the police. Afterwards, she recklessly went to drink alcohol to ease her mind. Miran felt very foolish and thought she wasn't suited to live in that era. On the other hand, Dong-chan, who couldn't find Miran, kept trying to locate her by tracking her through GPS. He immediately went to where Miran was and scolded her because he was extremely worried. However, Miran told him to mind his own business. She also forbade Dong-chan from feeling responsible for her life. Miran promised she would never hate Dong-chan if he truly did that. As Miran was leaving, Dong-chan said he might be starting to like her. That statement made both of their body temperatures start to rise. Miran felt it made both of their body temperatures start to rise. To keep from being curious, Miran asks about Dong-chan's relationship with Haeyoung. In the end, she feels happy after finding out that their relationship has ended. Meanwhile, Hong-soo persuades Haeyoung to announce that he is the one responsible for the experiment 20 years ago. Although Hong-soo previously tried to cover up this case, this time, he wants to use it to smooth his entry into the political world. If Haeyoung agrees to be on his side, he promises that his position as CEO will be passed on to Haeyoung.
내가 태풍도 미풍도 다 막아줄 거고.
Moving to a restroom, Miran accidentally runs into Haeyoung. She was warned to be more careful, considering Miran's identity as a cryonic human must be kept secret. Haeyoung doesn't want Dong-kan to become infamous due to Miran's actions. In a meeting, Miran once again receives a cynical treatment from the lead writer as an intern. Miran has never greeted her at all. Eventually, Dong-kan invites Miran to have a private conversation. Previously, Miran had indeed sent a message, but the writer only accepted direct conversations. Dong-kan then suggested that Miran learn about BTS to improve her relationship with the writer, because it turns out she is a huge fan of BTS. When the meeting was held again, Miran proposed bringing in BTS, but it seemed like it wasn't the right time, so Dong-kan held her back by grasping Miran's hand. Night fell, and even though the other employees had gone home, Miran, as the assistant director, had to accompany Dong-kan until late. The tension that overwhelmed Miran tempted Dong-kan for a moment, but he tried to restrain himself. Finally, Miran was allowed to go home early.
아유 정말. 야 너 집에 가.
That night, a witness to the Jibung car explosion was going to come. Lee Xiaodu's personal information was also successfully obtained. From there, Dong-kan discovered something odd that happened in 1998. Where Lee Xiaodu was attacked by several groups, which left him in a coma for 50 months, and miraculously, Yumin returned. Dong-kan clearly remembered the data of the person who was the same as Lee Xiaodu entering the capsule in the same year. On the other hand, the witness was intercepted by Lee Xiaodu's men and taken away, so he couldn't meet Haeyoung and Dong-kan. In a phone call, the witness asked for help to save her husband inside the capsule. The witness also asked to be allowed to live with her husband. Then, they would live on the outskirts of the city and would no longer disturb Lee Xiaodu's life. Meanwhile, Dong-kan realized that Haeyoung kept trying to get closer to him. That night, Dong-kan once again rejected Haeyoung and truly ended their relationship. Dong-kan felt that he no longer liked Haeyoung. Meanwhile, Haeyoung realized that Dong-kan had moved on to another woman's heart. Meanwhile, Sun accidentally found out that his son was getting close to Miran. The next day, Jae-hin received good news because he had been accepted for an internship at TPO. Unfortunately, his mother had decided to get a divorce. Switching to Professor Huang, who was taken to the salon to have his hair styled at that time. After work hours, Dong-kan insisted on taking Miran home, and Byung-sim accidentally saw the incident. Immediately, Byung-sim got angry and made a warning video for Dong-kan to stay away from his girlfriend.
이봐 마동차, 내 여자에게서 멀어져.
Eventually, Miran realized Byung-sim's presence and informed Sun about Byung-sim now living in her house. As a result, Sun came and looked very angry. Byung-sim's video also circulated on the internet, causing many employees to think that Dong-kan was stealing someone else's girlfriend. In the end, Dong-kan met with Byung-sim. Unexpectedly, Dong-kan offered Byung-sim a chance to appear on TV. Due to Byung-sim's circulating recording, Miran felt uncomfortable with Dong-kan. She tried to apologize, and accidentally, Haeyoung saw the closeness between Miran and Dong-kan. A while later, an article appeared about Miran being a sub-check of Cryonica's answers and using connections to work at the TV station. They were still curious about who wrote the article. Was it Young-sun, who lost her husband, or Haeyoung, who was hurt because she could no longer have Dong-kan? Right now, Miran is very radiant. Dong-kan admitted that he would protect Miran because he would take responsibility. Miran just needs to live her life happily. Even so, Miran does not regret participating in the experiment 20 years ago. Because of that, they will live their lives confidently like they did back then.
후회하지 않아?
As a result of the article that had already spread, many employees felt it was unfair because Mirang was made the assistant director not because of his abilities, but because of connections. Dome tried to explain that Miran is someone who always participates in his experiments, and Miran also has a unique talent that no one else possesses. That conversation was overheard by Nirang. The author of the article about Miran was finally tracked down, and it turned out to be a second-year middle school student. Strangely, when the article was uploaded, the student was asleep in her class.
그게 무슨 소리야? 그럼 그 중학생의 아이디 도용이라도.
On the other hand, Miran had written his own article stating that 20 years ago, he participated in an experiment that lasted 24 hours. However, he woke up 20 years later, at the age of 44, and Miran also struggled to find a job. In the end, a TV station implored him as a solution and compensation for the 20 years he lost. Even so, Miran only worked as an intern, constantly striving to gain recognition. The article touched many people, garnering support from the public and his office colleagues. Meanwhile, the relationship between young Sun and Miran was not going well. She was upset because both her son and husband liked Miran. Tiangja, who heard about this, was very surprised and assumed that young Sun was the author of the article about Miran. Elsewhere, Pyeong-sim tried to persuade Miran's parents to get their blessing. He even claimed to be Miran's first love. This made her mother very angry. Her anger intensified when Pyeong-sim admitted that he would divorce his wife to be with Miran. Information was obtained about the death of Lee Se-du's wife, which was suspected to be due to a heart attack. The news was attempted to be kept secret, which made Dong-kan suspicious, and he asked Taeyang to broadcast the news so that the police would investigate the case. He hoped the perpetrator would be found soon. Meanwhile, Professor Huang took out one of the secret recipes he had kept until now. His memory has not fully recovered. If something happens to him, Pibam is asked to keep the secret recipe. By chance, Professor Huang saw Lee Se-du's twin, and he suddenly remembered several events from the past. Meanwhile, the article about Miran also reached Lee Se-du's ears, along with information from the police providing a unique fact that Professor Huang is still alive and living at Miran's house. Meanwhile, Dong-chan saw Miran smiling at Ji-hun, who was at the TV station. That incident seemed to make Dong-chan a little jealous. Meanwhile, Miran finally found out that Ji-hun is Young-sun's son, which automatically makes Ji-hun also Byung-sim's son.
너 아버지가 황병심이야?
Afterward, Miran was informed by Youngi about Dong-chan, stubborn and demands good evaluations. Even though the ratings are impossible, Miran is also wondering why Byung-sim was invited to the Go-Go's 99 show. Apparently, Byung-sim is an odd fit for the Go-Go's 99 show. Elsewhere, Dong-chan meets Kim Jin, one of the camera crew from 20 years ago. The purpose is to ask about the camera situation in the past.
진짜 신기하다. 그 실험이 장난이 아니었네요.
On the other hand, Miran's vision suddenly blurs when Dong-chan tries to contact her. Miran doesn't give any response. Eventually, Dong-chan searches for her throughout the room. Dong-chan finds Miran in a sick condition. Miran actually feels like she has the flu.
감기 맞아?
Deep concern makes Dong-chan forget to keep his distance from her. Nevertheless, Dong-chan can't stay away from Miran, and even now he hopes that Miran doesn't have to lie to her own conscience. At that moment, Miran mentions that she likes Dong-chan, and all Dong-chan has to do is like her back.
지금 너무 바짝 붙어 있잖아요.
Elsewhere, Professor Huang has been kidnapped, and the kidnapper is none other than Lee Se-du, with his eyes covered. Professor Huang is threatened to sabotage the cryonics experiment. However, he also refuses to risk the lives of Dong-kan and Miran. Afterwards, Professor Huang is released again. The important fact that Miran is his father's first love leaves Cyan very surprised, especially after Miran's appearance led his father to divorce his mother. Meanwhile, Miran has recovered, and her relationship with Dong-kan is becoming closer and more romantic. As the days pass, Dong-kan picks up Miran again to head to the filming location. During the journey, he receives good news from one of his seniors. Miran is asked to write about the theme of love to be published soon. Elsewhere, Kibum is about to be fired and banned from entering the laboratory. Haeyoung receives a report about the voice of the witness they intended to meet earlier. The news is then conveyed to Donkin that the witness is the wife of Lee Xiaodu. At that time, Kibum also informed Donkin that Professor Huang's memory has now returned, but he is acting a bit strange. In the end, Donkin has to leave immediately, and Miran is asked to wait at the hotel until Donkin comes back to pick her
그냥
up.
좀 많은 일이 있어. 다녀와서 얘기해줄게. 너 숙소에 딱.
Currently, Professor Huang is trying to shut down the power source of the cryonic capsule. Fortunately, Donkin has arrived. Professor Huang considers his experiment a failure, which ultimately means Miran and Donkin cannot live normally, and will die. At that moment, Donkin really hopes Professor Huang will help him. He really wants to live a normal life with Miran because they both love each other.
평범한 사람들처럼 살아가게 해주세요.
In short, Donkin goes back to waiting for Miran. Without many words, they both kiss again. Because of that kiss, their heartbeats rise, and their body temperatures also increase. They both decide to kiss under the pouring water. For the time being, they still cannot live normally. However, Miran hopes that Donkin does not face everything alone. What she wants is for Donkin to live happily. Donkin feels the same way. He hopes Miran does not know sadness and suffering, because Miran's happiness is his priority right now. Elsewhere, Professor Huang intends to put Nemtai into a capsule for a long time, so that the man can find a cure, and eventually Nemtai can become a smarter person. However, Nemtai refuses, because if that happens, he won't be able to meet his family. That thought never crossed Professor Huang's mind, because the man never had a family. From now on, Nemtai will be Professor Huang's family.
내가 가족해줄게요.
A day changes, marking Jaehyun's first day of internship there. Donkin keeps trying to get Miran's attention to stay close to him. Accidentally, one of the employees sees their relationship. During a meeting, elsewhere, Lee Xiaodu invites Young-soo to meet. He instructs Hung-soo not to bring up the story of his wife's death and to cover up the case. If he refuses, then Hung-soo's political career will soon end. Reluctantly, Hung-soo sides with Lee Xiaodu. On the other hand, Donkin tells Jaehyun to keep his distance from a female senior. He even forbids him from studying with Miran during the internship. The prohibition was actually just an excuse to keep Jaehyun from getting closer to Miran. Afterwards, Donkin invites Miran to be alone in a room. Suddenly, Youngi enters, forcing them to hide. Accidentally, Donkin overhears Youngi's conversation about wanting to leave and move to cable TV. Unfortunately, the cable TV director doesn't want him, so he claims to be better than Donggan. This fact makes Donkin very angry. One day, Donkin immediately goes to meet his younger sibling. The person with his sibling is named Kabang Nam. Dongsan's purpose is to ask about Kubang's relationship with his sibling named Dongju. It turns out they are just friends. However, there's a reason that makes Donkin look very angry. Even Dongju doesn't want to be taken home. However, when Kabang tells him to, he immediately goes home with Donggan.
정주씨,
In the land of opportunity, Byung-sim went to the TV station to get the script. Even though we once received Miran's confession, Byung-sim always considered Miran as his first love. Afterwards, he accidentally met his son, and in a brief conversation, Jaehyun felt angry because his father liked Miran and even made her the definition of his youth. Meanwhile, one of the employees decided to quit the Google 9 show. Dong-chan tried to persuade her not to leave. Basically, the woman apparently liked Dong-chan. Through Dong-chan and Miran's notebooks, they exchanged messages to go on their first date, and it turned out that the date was done together with Nam-tai. After all, Nam-tai is a part of Miran's life. Therefore, Miran wants the person she likes to see her younger sibling first. She hopes Dong-chan can protect her family.
내 인생 속에 저 아이가 있어요.
When about to go home, Dong-chan saw the younger sibling enjoying Miris. Dong-chan tried to stop him, as Dong-ju is precious to him. Dong-chan couldn't bear it if his sibling continued to be with Kabang. The day changed, and the shooting for Google 9.9 was about to take place. Coincidentally, Dong-chan invited Dong-si, and even Jaeang-ja also joined in the event. The journey to the shooting location seemed very enjoyable. Dong-ju also slightly changed his appearance and started to stop drinking alcohol because he always remembered his older brother's words. The shooting event for Google 9.9 finally began, and for a moment they played and had fun without worrying about many things. When night fell, Dong-chan saw Young-di getting cozy with Jae-anja. Unable to sleep, Dong-chan and Miran had a meeting in the middle of the night. Meanwhile, on the other side, Hae-young met with Lee Seo-do. It turns out she had found out everything, that Priya was not Lee Seo-do, but a Priya known as Lee Hyun-do. It turns out Lee Hyun-do is the twin brother of Seo-do, who is still inside the capsule. 20 years ago, there was an attack on Seo-do before the inauguration of the unsung group leader, so Lee Hyun-do took his place, and this was done secretly, leading them to make an agreement. At that time, Hae-young wanted Dong-chan's safety. She also wanted Miran to go back into the capsule.
이영도, 당신이지.
On the other hand, Byung-sim started shooting. Unfortunately, Priya kept talking even though the script given was minimal. Byung-sim asked again if Dong-chan was dating Miran, but Dong-chan admitted that he is currently not interested in women. With Kim Jin's help, Dong-chan managed to obtain the recording of the experiment that happened 20 years ago. At the same time, Hyung-do came to the laboratory to look for his whereabouts. Unfortunately, Seo-do was not found. It turned out that at that time, Lee Seo-do had been taken out of the capsule for treatment. On the other hand, Dong-chan suddenly felt his heartbeat was unstable. Jibum realized there was a variation in the laboratory and asked Prof. Huang to come. However, his condition did not allow Prof. Huang to hand over the secret code to Jibum. Meanwhile, Dong-chan finally lost consciousness. At this moment, Hyung-do wants to eliminate Prof. Huang, but he can't do it because of his agreement with Hae-young. Very annoyed, he orders Hae-young to find Seo-do's whereabouts. On the other hand, Dong-chan was finally taken to the hospital and received treatment from Jibum. This kind of situation, it seems, will recur in the next 48 hours, and at that time, the antidote given will no longer be effective. Automatically, symptoms like this will also be experienced by Miran. Some lab variants have become toxic and only Prof. Huang knows the formula to handle it. Unfortunately, at this moment Prof. Huang cannot be reached.
저온 활성 단백질이 변이가 돼 독성화되는 증상입니다.
On the other hand, Hae-young sees all the anxiety happening. Hae-young tries to gather information from Jibum about Seo-do's whereabouts. She pretends to be on the same side as him. The increasing side effects apparently make Miran more desperate. She decides to write about the theme of first and last love. Before finishing her writing, Miran remembers Dong-chan and immediately goes to see him. Coincidentally, Dong-chan is also about to meet Miran because he is worried. That night, Miran is very sad and feels that life is unfair. There is so much she wants to do, but she cannot. Due to these side effects, Miran feels as if she is going to die soon. Dong-chan tries to reassure and encourage Miran that no matter what happens, he will accompany Miran wherever she wants to go.
우리 이대로 절대로 안 죽어.
In the land where he wants to return, he wants to, even though he knows his secret. But at this moment he feels cornered because he knows his weakness, which is none other than Dong-chan. If Professor Huang is not released, then Dong-chan will die, so he can no longer operate. The next day, a man named Jung-wo was brought in from abroad, known to be the son of Lee Seo-do. The detective learned about the meeting between him, and he informed Dong-chan. The car tried to block both of them, but fortunately, the detective was escorting them from behind, allowing Dong-chan to escape. Currently, Lee Seo-do is still under treatment and needs to undergo a transfusion immediately. Meanwhile, side effects have also reappeared in Dong-chan's body. In the end, Dong-chan met with him to make a deal. Dong-chan would reveal Lee Seo-do's whereabouts, but he must hand over Professor Huang. The day changed, and Dong-chan met with Hong-soo to ensure they were on the same side. However, it seems that Hong-soo doesn't know anything about him.
적군을 구분을 해야 돼서 단도직입적으로 물어볼게요.
Meanwhile, Miran had a meeting with her close friend. Yong-sun tried to persuade Miran not to get romantically involved with Ji-hun. Miran revealed she already had a boyfriend, who was Dong-chan. Meanwhile, Yang managed to find the address of the person who uploaded the article about Miran. Tracked to Young Sun's cafe. Kibum kept trying to make a potion for Miran and Dongchan. Dongchan also met with Haeyoung to ask about her purpose for meeting Yangdo that night. He was also curious why Haeyoung wanted to know the whereabouts of Lee Sungdo. Haeyoung's goal was apparently to make Miran go back into the capsule. That way, Dongchan would age and feel the pain of being abandoned by someone he loves. Even so, Haeyoung couldn't refuse Dongchan's request to look for Professor Huang. Until then, she immediately contacted Yangdo to release the professor. If Yangdo refused, then all the facts about him would be made public. Unfortunately, Yangdo also had a recording of the agreement with Haeyoung, which could also damage Haeyoung's career as a news anchor.
사랑의 눈이 멀어. 너무 조급했어.
On the other hand, Yang informed about the facts he obtained and suspected that the person who uploaded the article about Miran was Yongsun. Dongchan told Yang not to inform his girlfriend because the three of them were friends. Back to Haeyoung, who was still thinking about Dongchan, she felt guilty. In the end, she informed Dongchan that Gibum was in danger. Dongchan asked the detective to go to the laboratory. Gibum continued experimenting and Miran was also there. From the darkness, someone had entered the lab. Fortunately, Detective Young arrived just in time, causing the mysterious man to cancel his actions. Nuan had asked about a book there. And unexpectedly, the book was the Asian Codex that Professor Huang had given. Finally, the antidote was successfully found, but clinical trials had to be conducted first. Secretly, Miran volunteered to be a test subject without Dongchan's knowledge. Fortunately, the antidote worked, so Dongchan also received it soon after. Even so, both of them still had to maintain a body temperature of 31 degrees. Considering this was only an antidote for the side effects, days passed, and the Google 1999 project aired with funding. However, Dongchan had altered it by adding documents from the experiment 20 years ago, as well as the truth about Yongdu. He even recorded a conversation with Professor Huang, who had been invited by Yongdu to meet, and then an accident happened to him. A little while later, Soo-doo, who had regained consciousness, made a confession, and the fact finally reached the public that Yongdu used Sungdu's identity for an experiment. As a result of the incident, Dongchan's family restaurant was swarmed with journalists. Even Dongchan had to take responsibility for his actions, which were seen as turning the television channel into his personal channel.
사회 여론의 신장에 관한 사항을 위반하여.
Even so, Dongchan wasn't troubled, because what he did was for the public good. Meanwhile, Hongsoo and Yang were scared, even though neither would be jailed. However, both would still be summoned by the prosecution for trying to cover up the experiment from 20 years ago. Due to Dongchan's actions, a board meeting was held by the Unsung Group to ensure whether the company's leader was really Lee Se-doo or not.
사실이라고 반박할 확실한 증거가 있습니까?
At that time, Yongdu reversed the facts by claiming to be the CEO and stated that the one in the capsule was his younger brother. A few moments later, the real Se-doo arrived in the room, and their very similar faces made the city council members unable to tell which one was the real one. One of the senior lawyers tried to ask Se-doo about an important message from his late father before he accepted the position. The real Se-doo easily answered the question.
약은 외국 기업에 팔지 말고 지켜달라고 하셨습니다.
Yongdu was arrested for attempted murder. In the end, the news spread everywhere and Professor Huang was also found. Meanwhile, Haeyoung also had to undergo an investigation process for collaborating with Yongdu, leaving Haeyoung conflicted. Because she couldn't refuse the Dongkan ceremony, even though afterward she was devastated and lost her footing.
당신 한마디에 이렇게 흔들려야 돼.
On the other hand, Yongdu admitted to Se-doo that he was a frequent inmate. Meanwhile, Se-doo's existence was acknowledged. 21 years ago, Yongdu thought he had gotten rid of Se-doo. At that time, he was dying and needed a rare blood donor. His young child couldn't donate blood, so Yongdu felt his sibling would die if he didn't come. Who would have thought? His wife and both mothers were willing to put Se-doo into the cryonic capsule.
죽어가는 너를 냉동 캡슐에 넣을 거라고는.
Actually, everything was going smoothly. But the plan suddenly fell apart after Dongchan arrived. Today, everything is back to normal. However, Dongchan keeps asking Miran about which book he should choose and many things about work. Those questions make Miran increasingly annoyed. Dongchan tries to persuade her with jokes and hugs. But again, they have to maintain a safe distance. Afterwards, Dongchan decides to resign from his job. He plans to create a YouTube channel as his nephew suggested. Dongchan also invites Miran to create a channel together. However, Miran refuses with a very logical reason. Dongchan's resignation causes Youngki to decide not to leave the TV station, because if Dongchan leaves, he won't feel intimidated anymore.
그냥 여기 있을게. 사실은 알턴이가 빠졌걸래.
Goko 1999 has finally aired. Those who participated in the shooting were certainly looking forward to its appearance. News of Dongchan as a smart blood director re-emerged with the TV show Goko 1999, which at the time received high ratings. However, now, Dongchan has become unemployed, making it difficult for his family because he resigned without a solid plan. Dong only gave advice not to risk one's life for a job. He hopes Dongchan can live comfortably. A few days later, due to his boring daily life, Dongchan returned to the TV station, which greatly surprised his friends and Younggi. He also met Miran and Jaehin, who are now always together. Of course, this made Dongchan upset because of their closeness.
어디다 정신을 팔고 다니길래 배수를 못 들어?
One day, Dongchan received an offer to become the director of the board with a decent salary. However, Dongchan refused because he wanted to live freely without being tied to a contract. Meanwhile, Haeyoung intends to leave the company and take responsibility for everything that happened. She doesn't want to make the same mistake as 20 years ago. On the other hand, Youngju and Byung-sim have officially divorced. Afterwards, Youngja also nominated Young-sun to discuss the article about Miran.
글 올린 사람 뒷조사를 해보니까 IP가 이 카페가 나왔다고요.
Young-sun admitted that it wasn't him who leaked it. He couldn't possibly betray a friendship that has been built over decades. Switching to Dongchan, who will be staying in the attic of Miran's house for a week. He explained that his house is being renovated. Soon, Dongchan and Miran will be able to live like normal people. Professor Huang has also regained his memory. After successfully restoring Dongchan and Miran's temperatures, this cryonics experiment is considered a success.
그것만 성공하면 이 실험은 완벽한 성공이야.
That night, Miran visited Dongchan in his room. The two of them shared an intimate moment. However, that moment couldn't last long. Because if the heartbeat increases, the body temperature will also rise. They decided to go to a sauna that has cooling room facilities. Dongchan and Miran really want to engage in activities like normal people. A few days later, Dongchan returned to the TV station, even though, in reality, he doesn't work there. SUC plans to bring Dongchan back and only give scores, considering the city council members also don't want to lose Dongchan. This fact made Younggi upset and feel that he must act decisively and immediately expel Dongchan.
시도로만 할 거예요. 제발 줏대 좀 있어봐요.
After thinking it over, Dongchan finally created a YouTube channel. He received information that 20 years ago, Haeyoung took Kim Jin to the police station to search for Dongchan. However, at that time, no one wanted to help him, and Kim Jin couldn't help either because he was scared. In the end, Dongchan invited Haeyoung to meet on the rooftop of the building. Actually, Haeyoung hated himself for not continuously searching for Dongchan's whereabouts.
내가 잘못한 게 너무 눈덩이 같아서.
He should have stopped Dongchan from conducting the experiment. But he let it go for the sake of Dongchan's success. Accidentally, Miran saw the two of them sweating together. Of course, Miran was hurt seeing that incident. When she received a call from Dongchan, Miran didn't answer it, as she was still hurt, and tried to consult with her friends.
야, 나 이럴 때 어떻게 해야 되냐?
Miran hoped her friends would be wiser because they had to live a longer life compared to her. Youngsun suggested ending the relationship if Dongchan no longer loved her. Meanwhile, Hyungja actually advised to get rid of Dongchan and Haeyoung. Currently, Dongchan keeps trying to contact Miran, but her phone is not active. Finally, Dongchan asked directly to that line. At this moment, Miran no longer wants to argue, because if that happens, she will lose due to her overwhelming love for Dongchan. Miran will make a decision tomorrow because she doesn't want to make another mistake. The next day, Miran tries to find out more about Haeyoung. She feels insecure because Haeyoung is much prettier, smarter, and more successful. Afterwards, Dongchan invites Miran to talk. That's when Dongchan asks why Miran now seems so angry.
무슨 일인지 얘기를 해봐야지.
Miran admits that she once saw Dongchan and Haeyoung on the rooftop of the building, and she then asks if there is a relationship between the two of them. Dongchan can't explain everything because it involves Haeyoung's privacy. Even though his love for Miran is not the love at first sight kind, Dongchon says that he truly loves Miran. Miran is also curious about why Dongchon resigned from the company. Dongchon says that he must take responsibility for all his actions. However, for Miran, Dongchon should achieve his dreams first.
우리 처음 만났을 때 얘기했던 그 꿈 아직 마무리 못했잖아요.
In the investigation of the Youngdu case, there is still a lack of evidence because one of the hired killers has not been caught. The man is known to be named Terry. Terry's last task at that time was to eliminate Dongchon and Miran. In the investigation, Jang Woo-jin is a handsome man who is very popular and wealthy. He is also the largest shareholder of TBO. That day, he met with Miran because he wanted to become the chronicle of his beloved girlfriend. It is known that he is suffering from a severe illness with an incurable diagnosis. Therefore, he wants to accompany her into the capsule. His purpose in meeting with Miran is to find out what it feels like to enter that room, to ensure that the person he loves will not be in pain.
여자인 그 친구가 긴 시간을 그 안에 있어도 정말 괜찮은지.
Meanwhile, Dongchon keeps coming to the office. He will finish the work from 20 years ago that remains incomplete. In the meantime, Mrs. Kim finally learns about the relationship between her son and Miran. She was initially disappointed and vowed not to approve of their relationship. In the end, a family meeting was held. Dongchon had to come with Miran, and initially, the atmosphere became very tense. Fortunately, Miran managed to ease the tension with various jokes.
세상에 뭐도 없어요, 어머니.
Meanwhile, Byung Sim suddenly returned home, claiming there was a ghost in his residence. He kept persuading Young-sun to let him stay, even though Young-sun kept trying to kick him out. Back to Miran, who was visiting Dongchon in his room, she talked about Jang Woo-jin wanting to enter the capsule to accompany his beloved.
여자친구 따라서 냉동 캡슐에 같이 들어가겠대요.
If a similar situation occurs, Miran wants Dongchon to protect her from the outside. A few days later, Ji-hoon apparently became Dongchan's assistant. An interview was conducted for people who wanted to enter the capsule. Unfortunately, none of the participants had a serious issue that required them to enter that room. A couple pleaded for their son to be allowed to enter the capsule because currently, their son is suffering from cancer. Both are desperate, as there is no cancer treatment yet that can cure their son.
하지만 우리 아이는 지금 시간이 없습니다.
They also have to be prepared if their son has no memories of the family's time together. In a parking lot, Haeum saw someone trying to attack Miran. Haeum warned Miran to be more careful, because it could be that was the thug hired by Haeum. Recalling the incident, Dongchon gave Miran a stun gun for protection. Afterwards, he received news that Dongchan's house had been repaired. However, Dongchon pretended as if it wasn't finished yet, claiming it would take another week. He deliberately made this excuse so he could stay longer at Miran's house. After quite some time, Prof. Hwam finally succeeded in creating a reagent. This news was immediately conveyed to Dongchon. Soon, Dongchon and Miran will return to being normal humans. Meanwhile, Haeum continued to feel guilty for making a deal with Haeungda to put Miran into the capsule. Haeum decided to be honest and tell Miran everything so that the problem could be resolved quickly and she could feel more at ease.
질투.
He was injected first as a trial, and the process took 1 month for his body temperature to return to normal. On the other side, Miran and Detective Yeom were followed by a patrol car. The detective tried to assess the situation, but it turned out that the man was one of Haeungda's men in disguise. Terry attempted to attack the detective, and eventually, the detective was knocked down with his own stun gun, allowing Miran to escape. Back to Dongchon, who seemed to start showing signs of improvement on the 6th day, Dongchon was about to receive another injection. Meanwhile, the news of the attack on Miran made Haeung worried. She instructed someone to check all personnel in the police department to find Terry's whereabouts. After receiving treatment, the detective, who was now conscious in the hospital, informed Dongchon about the attack, making Dongchon very worried about Miran's condition.
합격하려 했다가
뭐?
In order to catch Terry, Miran decided to do it her own way, feeling more determined to capture Terry because the killer was targeting her. Even though, in reality, Dongchon wanted Miran to stay hidden until the police resolved the issue. At that time, Dongchon appeared to be in pain, which made Miran feel sorry for him and want to take his place.
대신 아파주고 싶네.
Days passed by, and every stage and development was always recorded by Donkan as documentation material. Behind all of that, Donkan persuaded Dongju to reconcile with Detective Young, and he also informed about his conviction being treated in the hospital. In the end, Donkan was able to resume his activities at the office, where a meeting was held with an idea that turned out not to be very good, prompting Donkan to hold back until he presented a more brilliant idea.
프로그램 만들면 너 같으면 보겠냐?
Unfortunately, Dongsan's body temperature dropped, making him feel cold when in an air-conditioned room. Meanwhile, Yong-soo suggested to Hae-young that she shouldn't stop working. He instructed her to become a correspondent in Washington for 2 years, considering it a form of responsibility for her actions so far. On the other hand, Ji-hun suggested that his mother enter the capsule so that Yong-soo could live in the future with a much better life. Even though they are divorced, Yong-soo feels happy because he has a good son, and if he enters the capsule, it would be the same as postponing work, because life is about suffering and struggle. One day, Donkan and Miran returned to the sauna, but now they had to be in different places. They enjoyed the day by cycling and having coffee at a cafe.
맛있겠다. 배신자.
The day changed, and Donkan received his final injection. As a result, Donkan developed a fever and had to rest for quite a long time. After waking up, Donkan felt better because his body temperature was now normal. The good news was then simply conveyed to Miran. In a meeting, Donkan apologized for involving Miran in the chronicle. However, for Miran, it was a blessing. Everything that happens surely has a lesson. By experiencing many things together, they could share time and love each other. In the end, the test results came out stating that Donkan had become a normal human. This news, of course, made his family happy, especially his mother. Meanwhile, Miran needs to get an injection the next day. Unfortunately, the next day Miran has a Go-Go 99 shoot, so it has to be postponed. Donkan also shared the good news with Miran's family. By going through this process, Miran will also return to being a normal human. The Go-Go 99 shoot finally took place. At that moment, Donkan came and unexpectedly hugged Miran. Terry came and immediately stabbed Miran. Actually, before that happened, Miran had realized Terry's presence, so she tried to protect Donkan from danger. In the end, Miran had to be taken to the hospital to receive treatment for her severe injuries. An operation actually needed to be performed. However, Miran couldn't be anesthetized because it would cause her body temperature to drop further. They were forced to cancel the operation plan. Miran had to return to the capsule, which made Miran's parents very sad. Even though it was a very difficult decision, Donkan had to let it go, because that was the only way for Miran to survive. In a package, Donkan received a gift from Miran, which made him even sadder. The incident also left Donsan's family feeling devastated. In the end, Donkan decided to stay with Miran's family. Currently, Prof. Huang is documenting people with a body temperature of 31 degrees Celsius. Since they are not the same as normal people, they have to start the research all over again. Meanwhile, Hae-young is going abroad. Even though she will be leaving Korea, she still asks someone to capture Terry and keep her updated on Miran's progress. On the other hand, Hyung-jae and Young-sun are also saddened because their friend has to go back into the capsule. Meanwhile, Donkan has to go through his days filled with sadness. The image of Miran keeps lingering in his mind. Meanwhile, the police finally discovered Terry's whereabouts, so Detective Young immediately headed to the specified location. Several years passed, and Donkan lived at Miran's house for quite a while. It was as if Donkan was a member of Miran's family. On the other hand, Hae-young has returned to Korea. By chance, she saw an article that Hong Suk had been fired. Meanwhile, Byung-se has now become a psychological therapy counselor.
푸른 초원을 걷고 있습니다.
Yeonja finally married Hyun-di. However, it seems that their marriage is not as harmonious as when they were dating.
장도 아니면서 뭐가 맨날 그렇게 바빠?
While Don Chon returns to work at TBO, he is known as the man with golden power. Nam Tai also starts opening her K-shops, and coincidentally, Professor Hwan visits, at which time Nam Tai misses her brother very much.
우리 누나 언제 깨어나요?
At the same time, A meeting takes place between Dong Ju and Detective Young, although Dong Chan keeps urging them to reconcile. However, that will not happen. For some reason, Dong Ju has not reconciled with the detective.
나한테 호감 느끼지 마.
Not forgetting, Dong Chan also always prays for Miran's safety, asking Jibim to bring Miran back safely. Dong Chan's prolonged absence makes his family start to wonder when he will return to live with them. Dong Chan admits he will return after he gets married. Meanwhile, the final clinical trial will be conducted. If successful, Miran will wake up, and at that moment, she must immediately receive an injection to return her body temperature to normal. Additionally, Miran must undergo surgery.
이게 성공하면 미란 씨를 깨우겠습니다.
All this time, Dong Chan has been pretending to be fine, but in reality, he misses Miran very much. He regrets not letting Miran receive the injection before him. Meanwhile, Hong-soo will soon leave TBO. After a long time, Dong Chan meets Haeyoung again. But this time, Haeyoung seems better and encourages Dong Chan to believe that Miran will return safely.
냉동인간이 그 사이에 6명이나 깨어났다는 뉴스 알고 있어.
News from the laboratory finally arrives. The clinical trial was successfully conducted. Miran is scheduled to be released from the capsule soon. After the operation was performed, Miran needed more time to recover from the effects of the BIOS drug. She has now been moved to the intensive care room. Several days later, Miran still hasn't woken up, making the situation more difficult than before. On Miran's phone, Dong Chan sees a diary from the first time they both worked together, to when they started dating. This makes him remember the beautiful memories with Miran. At that time, Miran's mother asked Dong Chan to leave her house. She didn't want Dong Chan to continue being consumed by sadness, but Dong Chan refused and didn't want to leave the house. Currently, his hope is starting to fade because Miran still hasn't woken up. One day, Dong Chan dreamed that Miran had returned. He immediately woke up and went to the hospital, and it was true. Now, Miran's body temperature has returned to normal. Days passed, and good news about Miran arrived. Currently, Dong Chan, who is working off the island, received news that Miran has truly regained consciousness. Dong Chan immediately returned to meet the woman he loves. In short, they are now back to their activities. Dong Chan was very angry because his team submitted a useless proposal, and Dong Chan also reprimanded Miran.
보민아,
네?
너 다시 인턴으로 강등되고 싶어?
The seasons changed, and Dong Chan asked about the marriage he planned to have with Miran. However, Miran said that she wasn't ready to get married because she still felt young. She apparently intended to go abroad to gain experience and study, which would take 5 years. Dong Chan was very upset, considering he had already waited for Miran for over 3 years.
야, 그러면은 나는 어떻게?
In fact, Mrs. Kim herself hoped that the two would get married before summer. In a book, Miran read all the longing, complaints, and difficulties that Dong Chan experienced while waiting for her in the capsule. In the end, Dong Chan decided to follow Miran's wishes to help her achieve all her dreams. However, Miran didn't want to part with Dong Chan, so the two decided to quit the TV station.
마동찬 PD랑 고미란 씨랑 같이 떠난다네요.
Thanks to a friend's solution, they finally agreed to create a YouTube channel. Miran and Dong Chan went to various countries abroad while thoroughly making video content and truly enjoying life according to their wishes. And the story ends.
자기랑 떨어지기 싫어.
나도 싫어. 난 네 꿈을 응원해.